Today on Absolute Anthem, we're going to be talking quite a bit about raids. Quote-unquote raids. Let's actually talk about the word raid first and foremost, because I think at this point, BioWare has done just about everything they can to avoid directly using the word or the term raid. The dev team has gone as far as to say on Reddit that they don't have raids, but they have raid-like content coming, and John Warner further spoke on this point in their recent February live stream, where he said, we don't internally call them raids, but we do have aspirational endgame content coming after the game's release, shortly after the game's release, that will be there to challenge hardcore players and to put all of their hard-earned gear to the test. I think the big thing happening here is that they're trying to set appropriate expectations for whatever this piece of content might be, whatever this endgame activity might be, and that's a theme that they've been engaging on pretty heavily throughout Anthem's development. They've been tremendously transparent, and I think they've done just about everything they can to set proper expectations without just explaining every single piece of the game to us and essentially exposing every single one of the game's secrets and mechanics. So when they say they have raid-like content, or when they say they have something for the end game, but they're not calling it raids, I think it's all about ensuring that players who have participated in raids in games before, whether it's Destiny or an MMORPG like World of Warcraft, don't suddenly make this checklist in their head of all of the things that the best raids they've ever played have and expect those things to then be in this piece of endgame content for Anthem. I think it's all about them giving themselves that freedom to do whatever it is they're going to do, whether that's bits and pieces of what you might find in a traditional raid or none of that stuff at all, and not have anyone feel like they've been lied to or that they've had their expectations set incorrectly based on what the developers have said. So, that all being said, what are a few things I would like to see in this piece of hardcore endgame content, and how do I think BioWare might deliver it and handle it? Now, first and foremost, they have said that this activity, whatever it is, will utilize matchmaking just like the rest of Anthem's content. And I imagine this is just a theme they're going to carry through as long as they possibly can. They want to ensure that people can matchmake. It increases accessibility for individuals who might play the game alone, or maybe just with one player or two players. And they've already set a pretty strong precedent for this with Strongholds by saying Strongholds are 4-player content. Like, I've thought a lot about it over the last few months, and I totally understand why they're so adamant on Strongholds being 4-player content, not 1-player or 2-player or 3-player or 4-player, but 4-player content. If you play alone, you will be match made with 3 other players. If you play with 2 players, you'll be match made with 2 other players, so on and so forth. Yes, you can play the main story arc, the critical path, alone if you choose to do so. You can even do certain side quests alone if you choose to do so, but there will be certain things in the game that are for players, and I think this sets a very strong precedent for the community to start to develop relationships and player groups on that 4-player ideology, to say, yes, this is a game where when we talk about endgame content, late game content, like Strongholds, like Legendary Contracts, we need 4 players. And I think it's important for whatever other endgame content they might do, especially close after launch, that they maintain that 4-player concept. Now, if they wanted to restructure the free roam portion of the game and allow more players to instance into free roam to tackle those open world random encounters, that would make perfect sense to me. Like having, 6 or 7 or 8 players that just show up in a random environment so people can kind of be like, hey, look, this is a cool little social space and we get to engage in random encounters with one another. That would be fine. I don't think they're going to go that path, at least not anytime soon. But when it comes to actual content, like endgame content, actual straightforward challenges and game types, I think keeping 4 players would be a really smart idea. I mean, again, you've already set that precedent, so why not maintain it? Build the game more like a dungeon crawler, keep the 4-player structure, and you'll never run into an instance then where you've got a bunch of people really stoked about playing your game. They've been playing it for 3 months now, they've been playing it for 2 months now after launch, and you say, okay, new content releases the end of this month. Get hype, we got new endgame content coming for you guys. We hope you're in Grandmaster difficulty, because this is going to put you to the test. Are you ready? Are you ready? And then it launches, and it requires 8 players. You suddenly cut off a huge portion of the community. You break that precedent you've already set for 4-player structure, and I think you end up frustrating a lot of people and just making a game with content that a lot less people get to participate in. I understand there's some extravagance, there's value to like 6-player raids in Destiny. I mean, I've ran a lot of those raids. I adore them. They are incredible. But let's just say this isn't looking to be a raid and it's looking to be endgame content. Let's just say Anthem isn't looking to be Destiny, it's looking to be its own game. I think the 4-player structure would be very, very smart. Now, what would I actually want to see in this endgame piece of content, like from a mechanical perspective? I really only have 2 big ones. I'm curious just to see what BioWare does, but there's 2 things that I would love to see them explore. First and foremost is flight-focused challenges. This is a game where flying is already a huge part of the core gameplay loop, so take it one step further and really ask us to utilize the flying mechanics in this game to complete challenges, whether it's barreling our way through some sort of a chasm while being attacked by different enemies, or racing from one point to the next while carrying a specific object in a high-risk environment while maintaining our cooldowns on our jump jets by flying through waterfalls or something like that. Or maybe we're in an environment where there are certain targets that can overheat our jets, so we have to avoid those. I just want to see flight have its place within some portion of Anthem's endgame experience, because I think it would be really cool. I mean, plain and simple. That's just all I have to say about it. I think flying looks incredible in this game, and I want challenges that ask me to fly fast, and to fly well. I think that introduces a very nice element of pacing to a game where you're spending a lot of time shooting things, by asking you to step away from shooting things and spend a little bit more time flying, but flying with a very dedicated purpose. The next big thing for me is unique final encounters. So not necessarily boss encounters. We already know we're getting unique boss encounters with the strongholds themselves, and I hope those end up being really enjoyable and really rewarding. But when we talk about other endgame activity, I think that final moment, right, and whatever that activity is going to be one of the most memorable moments. Like, what is the last thing you have to do to complete, to overcome whatever that activity is? That's something that I want to be memorable, whether it's a unique boss encounter or, again, just a unique segment within that encounter, like the 4 of you flying in formation, escaping a collapsing temple, you know, and having to make your way out while dodging debris and while flying through different elements. I like stuff like that. Maybe it's not for everyone, but that's just something I'd like to see them do, and it's the first thing that my brain goes to, you know, when we talk about the things that Anthem has already showcased, that it is already looking to do as a part of its core gameplay experience. Now, I also think there's a huge chunk of interesting issues that I can't wait to see BioWare overcome. Maybe they've already solved those problems, but when we talk about matchmaking and endgame activities, you know, how far do you push the envelope in terms of complexity for an endgame activity where players can matchmake? You know, you're essentially saying you can just jump in and play alone. You don't even necessarily have to communicate. Most people probably won't. So how difficult do you make that content? At what point do you just say, listen, matchmaking's a great tool we gave you. It doesn't mean you get to play the entire game without communicating with other players. And this is the first time we're going to ask you to utilize the matchmaking system while also communicating with other players. I personally would be okay with that. I'd be all right if we got a piece of content that required player communication, that had some puzzle solving, or required a decent chunk of coordination, where matchmaking was just a great tool to get a 3rd person into the party, to get 2 more players into the party, to maybe even just fill out a full group of people who recognize, I'm going to have to hop on the mic and talk here. And in that case, you know, it could end up being one of those things too, where the first, you know, several days or weeks that activity is out, a lot of people who play solo who don't want to talk on the mic, just, you know, okay, this is not something I can do right now. But a week after its release, maybe you've got people just running it in small groups and chirping people through in matchmaking. It suddenly becomes more accessible to those individuals who didn't really want to hop on the mic, because you still have that matchmaking tool there. So yeah, I'm excited to see how it all pans out. I think, you know, that focus on matchmaking and a focus on 4 players would just keep the community really binded together. It would keep that understanding for what is necessary, and it would allow people to really start to build out those relationships. I think when people really do get into a game, if their time allows it, and if they're willing to open up to randoms on the internet, which can be a terrifying thing, I totally understand that, you know, there's a chance that matchmaking can help you build some of those bonds and relationships to further experience a game like Anthem without necessarily having to rely on matchmaking. So we'll have to see how it all tumbles in sometime after the game's launch. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about these endgame aspirational activities. What would you like to see from them? What would get you excited? What are you looking forward to? And what do you think BioWare might do? Leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, be awesome to one another, because at the end of the day, it's all we got.